Well, yeah, you can clap for that. Sure, yeah, that's fun. Well, good morning, Crosswinds. I hope you're having a good morning. My name is Ed. I'm one of the student pastors here, and I'm excited to be here with you to conclude this series, Braving a New World. And for the past few weeks, we've been taking a close look at this character in the Bible named Daniel, which the book we've studied in is named after. And we've looked at a few of his amazing friends, and the names of his friends are actually really memorable and kind of incredible. And even though the Bible lists them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I know it's a mouthful, to me, they'll always be Rack, Shack, and Benny. Some of you will get that. For those of you who don't, that's probably not such a bad thing. It's okay. But I think a fairly accurate summary of what we've seen in the book of Daniel so far is how Daniel and his friends have managed to honor God with how they demonstrate wisdom, how they remained humble, how they clung to hope in the face of some very disheartening circumstances. And all of this while living in exile in a hostile, changing, and challenging new world. And all of this they do while remaining respectful towards their new leader, their new ruler. And this is what we're going to focus on today, the respect Daniel shows to the people in life. Even for those who would oppose him, make life hard for him, bring him harm, or even try to kill him. And hopefully what you just saw in that video a moment ago is a far cry from whatever you experienced in gym class. But when I think of respect, I don't know about you, but I think first of Rodney Dangerfield because of his bit, No Respect. And I also think of Aretha Franklin, of course, and apparently so did that gym teacher in the video. Only totally didn't pay attention to his grammar teacher all that well. So now that we're all on the same page, let's just talk about what we mean by respect. Because respect is not simply politeness or obeying those in authority or remembering to say yes, ma'am, or no, sir, please and thank you, although these are great things. Here's what respect is for today's purposes. Today, respect is holding another person in high regard, no matter who they are, and treating them accordingly. Another way of saying it is respect is valuing people and then treating them as valuable. So for the rest of our time today, we'll be discovering how we can be the kind of people who show proper respect to others all the time, no matter what. And I want you to know, as I studied this topic of respect and how Christians need to respond to people and how to show respect to others, I discovered there's a lot of videos out there about how to get respect and how to respect yourselves. Lots of articles, a lot of things written. And these aren't bad by any means, right? That's great. However, it's fascinating to discover how much more airtime there seems to be about how to get respect than how to show respect. It's amazing. It was hard to find stuff, actually, about how to show respect. But one example, a study done by Harvard Business Review in 2014 found this, that of the nearly 20,000 employees surveyed around the world in this study, no other leader behavior had a bigger impact on the people in the workplace across all their measured variables than respect. They found that being treated with respect was more important to people and more desired by people than recognition, appreciation, hearing an inspiring vision, providing useful feedback for their job, or even opportunities for learning, growth, making more money, and development. None mattered more than being shown respect. So if there's one thing I think we can all agree on around this topic, as demonstrated by the Harvard Business Review, Rodney Dangerfield and Aretha Franklin, and all of our life experience, I believe, it's that you and I want to be treated with respect. And for the most part, you and I know what we want. And sure, sometimes maybe it can get a bit foggy, like if you're at the Cheesecake Factory and you open the menu and you're like, I have no idea what I want. Maybe that's just me and big menus. But for the most part, you know what you want. And you know how you want to be treated. And Jesus, unsurprisingly, knows this about us too. So one time, he famously taught his followers this: so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law of the prophets. I mean, he's got us right here. We can't wiggle our way out of this. Here's what Jesus essentially says. He says, you know how you like when someone's patient with you? You know when you like when you're encouraged by others, when people bring you unexpected gifts, when they go out of their way to care for you. You like how you like being remembered by others. You know how badly you want others to treat you with respect. Okay then, he says, here's the plan. You be sure to treat other people that exact way. And he didn't qualify this. He didn't say certain people or certain deserving people or just people who agree with you. He said to do this for all people. So in everything. So why am I helping us to brush up on the golden rule today? Well, if you've been watching how things have been playing out in our world right now, one of the big ways I think we get this one wrong is how little we tend to show respect to others the way we would want to be shown respect. To remember that all people are valuable, and then showing them that by treating them as valuable, no matter who they are, no matter what they've done or what they think or believe. So if you and I desire to follow Jesus in today's culture with any kind of love or effectiveness, we've got to get this one right. Today, I want to ask you to recognize that this is a huge problem, and not only in our culture in that general kind of way, since I think most of us would agree that disrespect has been at like epidemic levels lately, but more so, I want you to look at yourself today, and I'm going to do the same. I want us to do some self-evaluation. Is there a person or a group of people that you've concluded in your heart, they just don't deserve my respect? If so, this is not a good thing. It's actually toxic. It's toxic to your own soul. It's toxic to the Jesus message. It's toxic to the watching world who sees so much disrespect being thrown around, none of which should ever come from the people of God. And although this may be unpopular to hear, please consider this. You can only disrespect someone if you are also judging them. Because to withhold respect towards someone is to have made a judgment that a person or persons are undeserving of your respect, either because of their sin or because of their perspective or any number of things. Disrespect and indifference towards others is always rooted in being judgmental. And when it comes to judging others, you can only really judge someone that you feel superior to, someone you believe is less valuable than yourself. And this is where the damage is really done because it directly impacts our love. The defining characteristic of a disciple of Jesus is love. And it's impossible to truly love someone and at the same time to disrespect them, to feel superior to them, to believe or to act like you're above them. And maybe that sounds unfair. All right, maybe it sounds unfair. Maybe you're thinking, Ed, you just don't understand. That person or that group of people are not deserving of my respect. Not only my respect, they don't deserve anybody's respect. You don't know what they've said. You don't know what they've done. And I just can't and I won't do it. I'll never be able to respect them. Maybe there's a part of you that has that for a certain person or group of people. Well, if you resonate with that at all, and I know that I have at times, today I want you to know that it's not only possible for you to still show respect to someone no matter who they are, but it's what God expects of us. And some good news, He will help us to do it. I'm not saying you need to like what they do, and I'm not saying you need to agree with them or to even choose to be in some kind of long-term relationship or friendship with them. We are called to love them, to show them love, and we are called to even love our worst enemies. We are called to love them, even as we are called to love our worst enemies. 1 Peter 2:17 says this, show proper respect to everyone. Now, we know from the Gospels that the man who wrote 1 Peter, the Apostle Peter, didn't always get this one right himself. In fact, if you recall, he kind of took out his sword one time and chopped off a guy's ear. Not historically a respectable move. And thankfully, Jesus was there to heal the ear. And so reading this verse from Peter is encouraging because it reminds us that God isn't going to tell us to do something like respect everyone and not help us to be able to do it. Simply invite Him to help you and see what happens. We also believe that God gave us Daniel as an example to follow. So let's turn our focus once more towards Daniel. In chapter 6, we see that a new king is in charge. Nebuchadnezzar is out and King Darius is in. And if you have followed along with the series so far, you know that Daniel has made a great name for himself in this new kingdom he finds himself in. But turns out not everybody's super happy about that. Daniel chapter 6, verse 3 through 5 reads, Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps. And so I'm actually going to pause here because I liked what Chris did last Sunday where he took that laundry list of titles and just kind of condensed it into one thing. So we're just going to call those people the king's team, okay? So So Daniel distinguished himself among the king's team by his exceptional qualities that the king had planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the king's team tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy, neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any bias for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." And even though this new king Darius thinks highly of Daniel, the king's team's on a mission to bring him down, and they're going to try to use his faith in God against him to do it. So starting with verse 6. So the king's team went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. We, your team, have agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it into writing so that it cannot be altered." So King Darius put the decree in writing. As with most kings we see in the Bible and in history, often their ego and their power override almost all other aspects of their being. You see, this is the kind of thing that kings just have the power to do and then do, because it boosts their ego and demonstrates their power. So Daniel, knowing the death penalty he'd face, continues to pray to God and does so with his window open in plain view to anybody, and he gets caught. And the king is essentially forced by his team to abide by the law the king himself had decreed. We read on as the king's team tells Darius, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." They really don't like Daniel. Now, maybe I'm embellishing a little bit. Maybe they didn't say it that way, but that's how I like to read it. Daniel prays, though, as we know. Daniel prays not because he disrespects the king. No, he prays because he's a man of obedience to God. And King Darius knows this. And it turns out, deep down, the king didn't really want to punish Daniel. We read on. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the king's team went as a group to the king Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. No matter what you want, king, we're going to get him." So at this point, I'm thinking, come on, Darius, why not just create a new edict or something? Just decree that the other decree was bogus. Can't you do that? Well, he doesn't do that. And now we've arrived at the part of the story that is very familiar to a lot of folks. As punishment for defying the king's decree, Daniel's thrown into a den of hungry lions. He's sentenced to death. Starting at verse 17, it says, "A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles." Big deal. So Daniel's situation might not be changed. It's like a forever kind of thing. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. Poor king, right? And he could not sleep. Clearly, the king knew this was wrong, but he went through with it anyways. We read on. "At first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, 'Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?' Daniel answered, 'May the king live forever. My God sent an angel. He shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I done any wrong before you, your majesty.'" Now, traditionally, I realize this story, in particular, this part of the story, is really all about how God comes through for Daniel, and Daniel was obedient to God. I get that, I know that, but there's something else here that maybe we miss. The respect Daniel shows the king. Notice Daniel's interaction, his reaction is not smug, it's not bitter, it's not resentful, it's not disrespectful, just the opposite. Think about this. To the man who is essentially willing to sentence him to death, sealing it with his own ring, Daniel says, "May you live forever." Daniel is still honoring and respecting the king despite what had been done to him. And in doing so, turns out Daniel wins over an entire kingdom. Wins over the king, wins over the kingdom. In Daniel chapter 6, verse 25 through 28, we see that after what happened in the lion's den, King Darius chose to write to all the nations of people of every language on earth. So he gets this letter and he blasts this out to everywhere he can send it, saying this to them. It says, may you, whoever you are, whoever reads this letter, may you prosper greatly. He's in a really great mood. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and revere the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And if you read on in Daniel, Daniel continued to prosper throughout King Darius' reign and then beyond. I highly doubt any of that would have happened if Daniel had emerged from the lion's den, spiked the ball at the king and said, in your face, Darius. Nice try, royal administration. Clearly you had no idea who you were messing with. I guess it's plain to see the God's on my side. He didn't do that. He obviously doesn't do this. Yet, having survived the punishment of death by ravenous lions, Daniel had every worldly right to boast, to strut, and to point out how superior he was to the king and his officials. But no, Daniel is out of the lion's den, and he says, O king, live forever. So Crosswinds, how can we become people like Daniel in this respect? No matter who it is, no matter what has occurred. How can we do this? As you know, respect is not something, and I'm guessing you may all agree, it's not something we're born into this world knowing how to do all that well. I mean, anyone with kids knows that respect isn't some kind of naturally occurring thing that parents receive from their young. As much as I wish my children, whom I love dearly, would naturally show my wife and I respect, they don't always. It's something we need to train in them and model for them. Being respectful towards others is a learned behavior, just like being hateful is a learned behavior, or being kind is a learned behavior. We learn to respect and we learn to disrespect. So with the time we have left today, let's take a look at some ways to train your brain and your heart to know how to show respect well to others. The first thing is this: learn to see other people as image bearers. Here's what I mean. Every person who crosses your path bears the image of God. We learn early in scriptures that all human beings were created in God's own image with his mark upon us, each one of us. The truth is, you've never locked eyes with someone for whom this is not true. Every person is loved and valued by God. He made all of us and we all belong to him. If you were to think right now, if you were to think of the worst person you know, which I imagine some of you, that was way too easy to conjure up, right? Like somebody just popped right in. It's okay, don't worry. But even that person you just thought of is unspeakably valuable to God. Same as you, same as me. My first experience with this idea was in high school at my youth group. I became a Christian as a freshman in high school, and so one of the things that the pastor did that first year was he came and he brought two $50 bills. First one was like mint condition, looked like it had just been printed, you know, and then he had another one that looked like it had been through the wash like 70 times and was all like, you know, wrinkled and dried up and, you know, corners missing and you could like see through it. So he showed these two, and as a freshman in high school, I didn't see a lot of $50 bills, okay? So he had my attention. And so he shows these bills to the whole group and he says, hey, if I could offer one of these to you, which one would you take? And like kid after kid's like, oh, I'd take the really sharp looking one, right? And everyone does that and it's no surprise. But then the second question is, all right, well, which one of these would get you more for your dollar at the store? And everybody immediately goes, well, obviously they're the same. They're worth the same thing. And he said, exactly. And he helped us to understand that how we view people is often how we view those bills initially. We're judging people based on how they look or what they've done, or we favor others. We devalue some or we value others. And he said, that's not how God works. That's not how he sees you. That's not how he values people. God treasures people more than he treasures anything else. More than anything he has made, no one person is valued by God more than another. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10 says that we are God's masterpiece. Another translation calls us his handiwork. It's like God's work of art is you, and on the corner of the frame is his name saying, this is something I made, and it is immensely valuable. You are the handiwork of God. You are his masterpiece, and so is every person you have ever locked eyes with. But learning to live like this and to think about people in this way flies in the face of how culture often instructs us to treat people, which often values people based on how they look, what they do, or what they think, or what we think that they think. Sadly, it's far too easy to simply graft ourselves into the way our culture thinks on this one. It's kind of like when you're at a huge concert, right? The lights go on, you know it's over, there's no more encore, right? Everyone stands up and starts filing out, heading towards the parking lot, packed like sardines, heading inch by inch, quickly, often frantically towards the parking lot. Then all of a sudden, on your way out, you're like halfway out, you realize, I think I left something at my seat. So what you do is you turn and you start to head in that direction. And man, is it hard to get there because everyone else is still leaving this direction, the opposite way you're trying to go. And as you try to get back to your seat to retrieve whatever you forgot, you get dirty looks from people, it's uncomfortable. And if you're doing it right, on the way you find yourself saying, oh, I'm sorry, or excuse me, thanks, I forgot something, as you struggle against the direction everyone else is headed. I'd say learning to live with a different kind of perspective in our culture when it comes to valuing people, one that chooses to respect all people, can feel like trying to walk against the flow of that kind of crowd. For many, it just turns into too much work, and we're swept away with everything. But it's work worth doing to go against that current. Although it can feel difficult to show others respect at times, whether you really show respect or not often shows up in how courteous you are towards them in the process. Imagine if after the concert, you're trying to get back to your seat, you start to sprint and grab people's heads and chomp over them. That wouldn't work, right? You couldn't do that. We need to be courteous with people as we navigate this. Showing others courtesy shows that they are valued by you and ultimately valued by God. And with this one, I'd invite you to get really practical and start where you live. When it comes to respecting others, first think of the people you see every single day. How can you be more courteous to the people who live in your house, who work next to you or very near you? By showing them that you value them, by showing courtesy to them, you'll be showing them that you also respect them. Remember to see other people, all people, as image bearers of God, as valuable, and then treating them as such. In doing so, you'll become more courteous and kind towards others. Next, learn to differ without demonizing. Respectful people learn how to hold differences well. We must train ourselves to respect others while disagreeing rather than devaluing, diminishing, or demonizing them. This is another learned skill because in our culture, there are so many unwritten rules about who or what you need to hate or be against. For instance, if you love the Raiders, it is written somewhere in your code that you also have to hate the Niners. Now, I'm not saying this. Please don't beat me up afterwards. But I'm just saying. Next, if you love MSNBC, apparently you then have to hate the other networks and Fox and whoever else, CNN and all the other stuff. Now, if you love In-N-Out Burger, you kind of have to hate all the other places that make a hamburger, apparently. They're all just apparently not as good. If you love the Cleveland Indians, then you have to kind of hate the Chicago Cubs. Hey, who am I kidding? Everyone loves the Cubs. That one doesn't count. Sorry. Just kidding. If you're a Mac person, somewhere it's written you have to hate PC. If you own an iPhone, somehow you have to hate Android. If you love PlayStation, then you need to make sure all your gaming friends know just how much better it is than an Xbox. Now, far more damage is done when we choose to demonize people who differ, not in what we buy or cheer for, but with the way we think. This has clearly been the case with politics lately. Democrats demonizing Republicans, Republicans demonizing Democrats. One candidate is praised while the other is viewed as pure evil. Folks who are actively pro-life or actively pro-choice demonizing each other. People who disagree on issues like gender identity and marriage equality, demonizing the other side. And I'm sure it's no surprise to you to hear me say that the people of God often disagree about God, or just people in general disagree about God and what to think of him, if he's real or not. And sadly, Sometimes people in the church choose to demonize those people outside the church. And Christians, along with people of other faiths, are often the recipient of all kinds of demonization as well. It's just flying everywhere. We must train ourselves to respect everyone, to disagree agreeably, to show love and respect to those who differ from us. And I don't know about you, but I'd love to see all of us not be so easily offended when someone thinks and acts differently than we do, when they don't identify with our ideas and our way of thinking. Instead, I pray that as the people of God here at Crosswinds, that we choose to identify with Jesus and his mission to love the world and draw all people to himself more than we identify with any policy or any political party. I mean, can we maybe do that? That may sound too idealistic, and it may even sound rather extreme to say we need to respect everyone like this. Well, I know it is. I know it is. Dr. Martin Luther King said it this way one time. He says, the question isn't whether or not we'll be extremists, because these are extreme times. The question is, what type of extremist will you be? So for our purposes today, we got to ask ourselves, will we be extremists for hatred or a certain political party or a certain policy or person? Or will we choose to be an extremist for love and for grace? Again, I don't know about you, but I think our culture is so ready to see Christian extremists for love and for grace, and not hate and judgment. So, differ without demonizing. Next, believe the best. It's simple it might be simple to judge people before ever meeting them, right? That sometimes happens, and that road leads to disrespecting them, just judging them before we know anything. However, we're taught in 1 Corinthians 13:7, among other things, to believe the best of everyone, to always hope in love. This requires an open mind and one not marred by cynicism. It made me think of this. Years ago, a teacher that I used to learn under named Shane Claiborne was sharing about an experience he had in the Middle East. He felt called by God to visit Iraq in the mid-2000s in order to love and befriend the Iraqi people, right? Like, this was a pretty extreme move on his part and a dangerous one for many reasons. At the time, bombs were still falling on Baghdad, and there was like turmoil all around. Not to mention, there were many Christians who heard about his decision to go to Iraq, and they like totally disapproved of it. They were unsure of why he would care to visit a country that was so opposed to Jesus. While there, in the midst of the chaos and the sadness, he actually met people. While there, he met the Iraqi people who never get airtime on the major news networks. Turns out he met some fellow Christians there too, lots of them. He even found himself at a church gathering actually, numbering in the thousands in Baghdad. One of these churches, during one of these services, he recalls there being so many people that they needed to stand outside the venue. Many were gathered together, hand in hand, just weeping and praying and crying out to God in many different languages. He had the chance to meet with the bishop afterwards, the Christian leader there, and Shane said to him, "Gosh, I can't believe how many Christians there are in Iraq." And the bishop looked at him and smiled and said, "Yes, son, this is where it all started. That's the Tigris River. That's the Euphrates. Have you ever heard of them?" All of a sudden, Shane realized, of course there'd be Christians in Iraq. In fact, there were millions. So much of what we read about in the Bible happened right here in this part of the world. I remembered hearing Shane's story some 12 years ago and being absolutely shocked because so many people in the U.S. at that time, including myself, had such a terrible and negative view of what the Iraqi people were like. What Shane described seemed unreal. I was just ignorant. Now, have you ever believed really negative stuff about an entire group of people without ever truly having met them, without ever having talked with them, without ever hearing them out or putting an effort in to better understand them? To show respect to others, you need to train your mind to believe the best about people and, when possible, get to know them. That's what respectful people will do. And so next, let's talk about how we don't want to use harsh words to hurt others, right? Harsh words are sometimes used. Even Jesus uses harsh words sometimes to get a point across. But we should never use words to hurt other people. That would be the purpose. Those who show respect are very careful in choosing their words. Proverbs 15:1 states, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words make tempers flare." Some verses in the Bible need no explanation, right? This is one of them, very clear. It's the wise and respectful person who takes stock and decides to use words that will adequately reflect who they want to be. Ephesians 4:29 reminds us, "Let no unwholesome words come out of your mouth, but only words that build others up." Now, I remembered hearing this initially years ago, and it was used in the context of why you shouldn't use swear words, where I'm not advocating that you do that, but this is so much more about how you speak, not just certain words you use or don't use. Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Don't disrespect people. Don't belittle them. Don't use harsh words for them to hurt them, but build them up. Respectful people only use words that build up others, even when writing, and especially maybe in the context of writing on social media, right? Where it has become far too easy to be careless with our words. Growing up, I'm sure you've heard this statement. "Sticks and stones, here, help me out with it. Sticks and stones, my brick and bones, but words will never hurt me." I got to tell you, I think a more accurate description, because, I had lots of scrapes and bruises, but I think this is probably more accurate. "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words do permanent damage." I think sometimes the words we hear, and maybe you can call to mind some of those words you heard when you were maybe a child, maybe words you heard last week or this morning. Sometimes those cut deeper and hurt more. So our reaction to people are often far harsher than they should ever be. And sometimes, especially online, our harsh words can be linked to proximity and our lack of closeness to others. Let me explain. Imagine for a moment that you're in a grocery store, right? You've got your cart, you're pushing, you're shopping, doing all your normal shopping things. And for some reason, all of a sudden, all the shoppers in the shopping center, in the grocery store, begin to treat and act with each other like they do on the road. Right? That would be a pretty memorable Whole Foods visit, wouldn't it? Lots of yelling, people pounding on their push bar, throwing kale chip bags at each other. Lots of single-fingered gestures and you being flung around, people getting right up behind people, being like, "Why don't you move?" Someone mumbling to themselves about how much they hate people like them, You hear people, you'd probably hear people shouting things like, "Oh, 15 items or less, looks like you've got 17 there. Learn how to count, buddy." Some of you are like, "Yeah, that's right, I've seen it." No, don't do that. I'm not saying. If you were to walk in on a scene like that at the grocery store, you'd think everyone had gone nuts, right? But we do it all the time in our cars. From a distance, behind glass where nobody can really see or hear us all that well. Now, the reason people don't act like this in the grocery store is because in the store you see someone's face, you're close to them, and it's much easier to recognize that they're actually just another human being like you. If someone accidentally cuts you off in the grocery store, you just pause and you keep on rolling. You don't stomp your feet like a toddler and yell at them. I hope you don't. This is why the internet can be such a toxic place. It is the most impersonal and sometimes anonymous place for all these negative human interactions, and therefore social media has become incredibly volatile, especially lately. There's such a distance, and words are so flippantly typed and hit send. It's just become a toxic place. So please remember to communicate online the same way you'd communicate with a person you may bump into at the grocery store. When we use harsh words to hurt other people, we're devaluing them, whether in person or online, and it's not something respectful people do. Words can truly hurt, and harsh words that are meant to hurt someone else have no place in the life of a follower of Jesus. So, if you're a respectful person, you'll use your words to build others up, and in doing so, you'll show those folks that they're valuable. And finally, we want to do this. We want to form opinions carefully. Respectful people practice the discipline of considering many viewpoints as they form opinions. They also prayerfully revisit issues and consider changing their minds when new information becomes available. Okay? Let me ask you, have you ever, like me, ever shared a post online that you didn't properly vet beforehand? Have you ever, like me, ever formed an opinion very quickly, only after having heard one side of a story? I don't know why I do this. Oh, wait, I do, because it's easier than fully reading the article, because that takes time, and then the headline looks so good and the source seemed okay, so I just hit send. And I do it because sometimes the story I hear, the one side, sounds like it's got to be the only right story, and I just discredit what the other side could possibly have to say. This isn't a good habit, but what is this: to slowly, carefully, and prayerfully form opinions. And this is a practice I learned from my former pastor, Bill, whose study on this matter of respect was hugely helpful in preparing for today. So, this morning, which one of these leaps out to you the most? Is there one up there that you know that you struggle with a bit? If there is, pray about it. Tell your small group. Ask someone to speak into your life about that. For 4 weeks, we've discussed the new world that we find ourselves in. Sometimes it's a relational one, a workplace one, a political one, or a family one. There are lots. But one thing's for sure. Braving that new world can be quite a challenge, but there's also tons of opportunity. It's not just challenging, there's a huge opportunity there. What we learned from Daniel is that when the people of God demonstrate wisdom, when they choose to be humble, when they hold to hope and trust in God, when they choose to show people respect, that the people of God can actually have a really good shot at influencing the culture that they live in. On the flip side, if we're unwilling to work on being wise, if we lack humility, if we've lost all hope and adopt a doomsday-like mentality, if we fail to treat people with respect, we'll have absolutely no chance of influencing the decisions and actions of those around us for God. We just won't. Whether it's our bosses, our teachers, our political leaders, certain family members, if we aren't able to learn from God in these ways, we'll have no power to bring the kind of transformation and change that Daniel was able to bring. Remember that at the end is not the end until God says it is, that we're called to put others first, and that we're to value people and treat them as valuable, to show them proper respect. So, would you please pray with me? Father God, we thank you so much for Daniel and for your son Jesus, whom right now I just want to say thank you for. Because of him, he demonstrated how valuable we are all to you, that he gave his own life for us. Help that inform our understanding of our value, that for us and for the people sitting next to us and for the people we'll see the rest of this week, that every single person is valued and loved and cherished by God, worth the very life of your own son. Let that inform how we treat people and help us to be people who show respect. We pray all this in Christ's name. And everybody said, amen. You guys have a great rest of your week.